Okay, we continue on with our sermon series of God's wisdom more valuable than gold. And today our sermon is about being wise about money. A lot of people don't like to talk about money, especially in church, but we need to. Scripture references are Proverbs 11:28, Proverbs 11:10 through 10 through 12, Proverbs 3:9 through 10, Proverbs 21:20, Proverbs 22:7, Proverbs 7:11-15, Proverbs 6:1 through 5, Proverbs 3:13 through 15, Proverbs 23:4 through 5, and Proverbs 30:7 through 9, 1 Timothy 6:6 through 10, Proverbs 11:24 through 25, Proverbs 19:17. Now maybe I can take a breath. A lot of Proverbs. In our sermon series in the book of Proverbs, we've been exploring some very challenging and controversial topics like anger, the tongue, sex, and alcohol. Today, we'll continue that pattern as we dive into everybody's favorite topics, money. We pick up our thoughts and attitudes about money early in life. One day, a young boy was with his mother at the grocery store, and as they were checking out, the cashier handed the boy a candy bar. And the little boy's mother said what parents often say, "What do you say to the cashier, son?" The little boy replied, "Charge it." I think his mom was looking for a thank you, but on another occasion, a young girl was with her mother at the ATM, and her mother was telling her to push the right buttons, and the money was dispensed in the tray. The little girl squealed excitedly, "Look, Mom, we won!" We might wish it worked that way. The Wall Street Journal published an article with an anonymous quote that defined money as an article in which may be used as a universal passport to everywhere except heaven, and as a universal provider of everything except happiness. The writer might have added that the money is also a provider of covetousness and competition, and is a wonderful servant but a terrible master. What the Bible said long ago is still true. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, 1 Timothy 6:10a. Clement of Alexandria, a Christian theologian born in the 2nd century, said, "Wealth is like a viper." Talking about vipers this morning, which is harmless if a person knows how to take hold of it. But if they do not, it will entwine around his hand and bite him. On a positive note, Billy Graham said, if a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area of his life. Solomon, the wise writer of Proverbs, would agree with all those quotes, because Proverbs is a book with practical wisdom. It's not surprising it has a lot to say about money and how to handle it. We live in a world where money is a fact of life, and we have to learn to deal with it, and that does take some wisdom. Money can be either a great blessing or a great curse, but it depends on whether or not we learn to be wise in our pursuit of it and use of it. As you probably know, there are various tons of books and sermons and seminars and courses that focus on how to get rich. Unfortunately, many of the books, seminars, and courses are less than helpful to those who buy them, and mostly helpful to those who profit from them. But that's not the case with the wisdom about money offered in the Proverbs. For one thing, it's free of charge. And for another, it's God's wisdom, so we know it works. The wisdom about money offered in Proverbs is scattered throughout the book, but from all those scattered verses, some principles about money emerge, and I want to share them today. Starting with, first principle, put your trust in God and honor God with whatever you have. That's the number one thing. We'll repeat that. Put your trust in God and honor God with whatever you have. Proverbs 11:28 tells us, anyone trusting in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage. Proverbs 11:28. In Proverbs 18:10 through 12, it says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected. The wealth of the rich is his fortified city. In his imagination is like a high wall. Before his downfall, a person's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. Again, Proverbs 18:10 through 12. These proverbs clearly delineate the downfall of those who trust in their riches and allow their riches to be a source of pride. No matter how rich or poor we might be, we must be humble and put our trust in the Lord. And we must realize that everything we have comes from God, and we wouldn't have anything or have the ability to earn anything without God's help. Before we do anything else with our money, we should first honor God with it. Proverbs 3:9 through 10 tells us, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Then your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. Again, Proverbs 3:9 through 10. The principle of first fruit giving became the norm in Israel because of God's commands in Deuteronomy 26:1 through 11. Within this principle is the understanding that everything comes from God, and therefore everything ultimately belongs to God. By giving to God first, we honor God and show our trust in God's ability to provide. We honor God by giving to God from our first fruits, not our leftovers. We start by our budgeting process, by deciding what we should give to God, and then we work on living the rest. These verses from Proverbs 3 suggest that it's these first fruits practice is followed, then there will always be plenty of produce and wine. You know, that was brought home to me a number of years ago in a way that you kind of might not even think about. I certainly didn't right away. But I was telling my Pentecostal buddy that I refer to a lot in my sermons about that my wife had gone down to the little train store and sold all my childhood trains. And got $300 for it. You know what he said? Well, did you give any of that to the Lord? Wow, I hadn't even thought of that. Didn't even cross my mind. But you know what? I did. I gave a portion of the Lord as a first fruit. It's a good principle to follow, and it always follows you and blesses you. In verse 10, it has caught the attention of those who promote the health and wealth gospel, and it says, following the first certain financial practices guarantees God's blessings. But notice that the point here is that we must honor God with our money, not manipulate God into giving us more money. God's promise is that when we put Him first, then we will have all we need. And that's what Jesus says in Matthew 6:33 about seeking first the kingdom of God, and the necessary things of life will be provided for us. The Bible as a whole presents the truth, and some righteous people will be wealthy and other righteous people will be poor. Truth is that wealth isn't always what's best for us. Wealth has been the ruin of many people. Also, we must understand that there are other forms of blessings that are more important than money and material things. And that's why Jesus taught us to lay up treasure in heaven rather than here on earth. When we experience heaven someday, I don't think any of us will say, I wish I had more money and possessions while I was on earth. Yeah, no, you won't even think about all that stuff on earth. But sadly, there will be some who wish they had put up God's kingdoms first who hadn't. So the first principle about being wise about money is to put your trust in God and honor Him with whatever you have. Second principle today. Hello. Principle number 2, live within your means. In other words, don't spend more than you make and more than you have. This means that we should be good stewards who know how to balance your income and your obligations. A good budget puts God first by establishing our giving first, and then after that, our savings before we begin our spending plan. Proverbs 21:20 tells us, precious treasure and oil are the dwelling of the wise person, but a fool consumes them. The NIV renders it this way. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. When we wisely have savings in place, then emergencies are less of an emergency. Another important part about living within our means is avoiding borrowing money. We should be careful about going into debt. Proverbs 22:7 tells us, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. The word slave might sound rather extreme, but if you think about it, it's really not. Slaves are not free to do as they want. They have to do as they're told. In ancient times, people who become indebted often worked off their debt as slaves. The second we put ourselves into financial debt, we are then under control of those who we are indebted to. If we don't make our payments on time, then they can charge us penalties or change our interest rate, repossess our car, evict us from our house. Most of us wouldn't be able to buy a house without going into debt. And when we do, we should use wisdom and make wise choices about how much indebtedness and the interest rates we'll pay for it, and the percentage of our budget it will involve. We must be careful not to overextend ourselves by borrowing more, but when borrowing, make sure we have the income to cover the loan payment and still have enough left over for the other expenses. Proverbs 22:26-27 puts it this way. Don't be one of those who enter agreements who put up security for loans. If you have nothing with which to pay, even your bed will be taken from under you. Again, Proverbs 22:26-27. Credit card debt is crippling many people, especially now in this period of high interest rates. Sometimes people get into credit card debt because of emergencies or breakdowns or job losses, but most end up in debt because they bought things they didn't have the money for. They wanted something now and hoped to be able to pay for it later. Sometimes the motivation is to pretend to be wealthier than you are. Like the old saying, keeping up with the Joneses, Proverbs 12:9 says this, better to be disregarded than yet have a servant than act important but have no food. How many people have gone into debt buying things they couldn't afford in order to impress others or to try to keep up with them? But guess what? Those who we are trying to keep up with or trying to impress may have bigger debt problems than we know. Self-control and contentment are necessary. And once we've gotten ourselves out into debt, we need to work hard and quickly get ourselves out of it. And until then, we are a slave to the lender. There are several of us who are ready to assist those who need help learning how to budget and need help working their way out of debt. Just ask for some help. Other important debt that Proverbs warns us about is taking on the debt of others. Sometimes we're approached by people who want us to co-sign a loan for them, but we must be careful about doing that because we are obligating ourselves to pay the loan if they don't. Proverbs 11:15 says, If someone puts up security for a stranger, he will suffer for it, but the one who hates such agreements is protected. In Proverbs 6, 1 through 5, the wise man instructs us as to what to do after having put up security for another. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor or entered into an agreement with a stranger, you have been snared by the words of your mouth, trapped by the words of your mouth. Do this then, my son, and free yourself, for you have put yourselves in your neighbor's power. Go, humble yourself, and plead with your neighbor. Don't give sleep to your eyes or slumber to your eyelids. Escape like a gazelle from a hunter or like a bird from a hunter's trap. Again, Proverbs 6, 1 through 5. Notice how the wise man uses hunting imagery to describe the desperate situation of someone who's put up security for another person. He is like an animal caught in a trap, and an animal will do whatever they have to free themselves. We might decide to co-sign for a close friend or family member, but when we do, we have to keep in mind that we have put ourselves into serious jeopardy because we have no control over whether they follow through, but we are on the hook if they don't. Principle number 3. Don't sacrifice what is truly valuable for the sake of money. As you probably know, there are things that are far more valuable than money. As we mentioned during this series, wisdom is one of them. Proverbs 3, 13 through 15 says, Happy is the man who finds wisdom, who acquires understanding, for she is more profitable than silver, and her revenue is better than gold. She is more precious than jewels. Nothing you can desire can equal her. Another thing that's more valuable than money is a good reputation. Proverbs 22:1 says, A good name is to be chosen over great wealth. Favor is better than silver and gold. So a good reputation is a priceless asset, and all the money in the world can't buy one. And the pursuit of money and wealth can cost you the one you have. And there's a great proverb that gives another warning about sacrificing what is truly valuable for the sake of money. Don't wear yourself out to get rich because you know better. Stop. As soon as your eyes fly to it, it disappears, for it makes wings for itself and flies like an eagle to the sky. Proverbs 23, 4 through 5. These verses shouldn't be viewed as advising us to refrain from working for a living. Rather, they are telling us of the importance of knowing when enough is enough. This whole thing about what's more valuable than money just came crashing into my life a couple weeks ago. Very personal. I knew my little dog wasn't feeling well. She didn't want to walk, and she loved to walk. And took her to the vet, and I gave her an IV and told me that she had problems with her kidneys, and she needed to go to visit the emergency room. So I took her up there, and of course they wouldn't even treat her without having a whole bunch more money than the vet even charged me. And they treated her. And I'm worried, like, man, this is big time money they're costing me. How am I going to deal with this, you know? Finally, the next day, they told me that their treatments weren't really doing anything for her. And they told me that dogs that go into renal failure just don't get well. Like Rebecca said the other day, they didn't sugarcoat it. This is the way it is. So when they said that treatment wasn't helping any, I'm going to take her home then. Let her die where she's comfortable and around the people and things that she knows and loves. And later on, I kind of calculated up how much all this was damaging me. I talked to my financial advisor and got some money out of my investment account to cover all this stuff. But that's not the important thing, that money. How much did I love my little dog? Even though they told me they couldn't help her. Am I not going to pay for treatment? Am I not going to pay for what's important to me, important to her? And of course I did. There are some things more valuable than gold. Some things more valuable than having money in the bank. Some things more valuable than being rich. These proverbs about wisdom and reputation and that reveal the truth that wealth is often a fleeting thing. And the fact that it isn't worth the sacrifice of our health, our family, or even our lives. There has to be a balance between work and leisure, and the wise person will recognize that balance. In the end, what's the point of getting money if we don't have the time to enjoy it? If we don't have someone to share it with? Or if we die striving to get it? Those who pursue wealth are often thinking about the bottom line. And according to Proverbs, over the pursuit of wealth at the detriment of everything else is not a wise use of our lives. Principle number 4. We learn to be content with enough. Proverbs 37 through 9 contains a powerful prayer that we would all do well to pray and live by. And here we go. 2 things I ask of you. Don't deny them to me before I die. Keep falsehood and deceitful words far from me. Give me neither poverty nor wealth. Feed me with the food I need. Otherwise I might have too much and deny you, saying, "Who is the Lord?" Or I might have nothing and steal, profaning the name of my God. Again, Proverbs 37 through 9. That's a good daily prayer to keep in front of our eyes. This prayer sums up the spirit of Proverbs, where money is concerned. Make me neither poor nor rich. Why is it better to be neither poor nor rich? So that we will be able to keep perspective and maintain our spiritual priorities. If we have too little, then we'll be tempted to sin in the way that we pursue money. If we have too much, then we might forget about God and become proud and self-centered. Similarly, Proverbs 16:8 says, "Better a little with righteousness than a great income with injustice." And Proverbs 15:16 says, "Better a little fear with the Lord than a great treasure with turmoil." Better a little with the fear of the Lord than a great treasure with turmoil. The pursuit of much more can lead to an injustice and the exploitation of others, and great treasure can bring much turmoil and many problems. Learning to be content with what we have is wise and is a safeguard. The Apostle Paul gave us some important spiritual truths when he wrote about money and contentment in 1 Timothy. Let's look at that. "But godliness and contentment is a great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out. If we have food or clothing, we will be content with these. But those who want to be rich fall into temptation, a trap, and many foolish and harmful desires will plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and by craving it, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." I can tell you this. This is a very true statement that he made here. As I know, I look back at my own life, when I came into this world, I literally came in with nothing. I didn't even have a mother and father. Nothing. And guess what? When I leave, I will leave with nothing. I'll leave everything whatever I supposedly earned, I will leave it. So what are Paul's main points? First, Paul said we came into the world with nothing. That's absolutely true. And that's how we're going to leave this world. When John D. Rockefeller died, a reporter asked one of his top aides, how much money did Rockefeller leave behind? The aide finally said, he left all of it. Doesn't matter how much we leave behind, whether great or small, we leave it all, every bit. Second, Paul said if we have what we need, then we should be content with that. If you want to talk about being a minimalist, Paul said that having sufficient food and clothing is enough. Our needs may be a little more than that, but we certainly need shelter, and it's certainly reality. Our real needs are not much more than that. And because we're kind of scattered in our communities, most of us at least need a car to get back and forth and get to the grocery store and stuff, but we don't need a whole lot more than that. I hope in this time of year and this weather, you got air conditioning at your house. I think you need that. But I mean, again, how much more do you really need? Last of all, Paul said, the desire to get rich is dangerous, both physically and spiritually. The love of money and this pursuit of wealth has led many people to ruin and destruction. Along these lines, Proverbs also warns us against the get rich schemes. You know, when I was growing up, magazines and comic books always had in the end, always all these different ads and stuff in them, and in there was always a lot of get-rich-quick schemes, you know. If you ever watched Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners, Jackie and Ed Norton were always looking for some get-rich-quick scheme. You know, they were always going to do this, always going to do that. My brother-in-law, he was always into that. You know, he was always going to do this and going to do that. Promise of easy money quickly gained has always been temptation. But modern technology makes it even more widespread, and it's easy to be exploited. All of us have received emails about super rich African princes who need our help moving their wealth to America, and they'll give us some of it, or half of it, if we'll move the money into our bank account. How thrilling and exciting, right? Wow. What a quick and easy way to become rich. We all know what happens. Rather than putting our money into our account, they take our money out and put it into theirs. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth obtained by fraud will dwindle, but whoever earns it through labor will multiply it. The one who profits dishonestly troubles his household, but the one who hates bribes will live. That's Proverbs 15:27. And Proverbs 20:21 says, an inheritance gained prematurely will not be blessed ultimately. When we earn our income through hard and honest work, we have a better sense of the value of money. But when the money comes too quickly or in too great an amount, we don't have wisdom or self-control. The money causes trouble and hardship. The majority of those who win lotteries end up bankrupt, divorced, or dead. The truth of the matter is that most of us would not be able to handle sudden wealth. Fifth principle, be generous towards the poor. There's a simple spiritual principle involved with money, and it is you can't be blessed by keeping it to yourself. It is somewhat of a counterintuitive concept, but Scripture is clear about the fact that you have to give in order to receive, and you have to lose in order to gain. Proverbs 11:24-25 says, one person gives freely, yet gains more. Another withholds what is right, only to become poor. A generous person will be enriched, and the one who gives a drink of water will receive water. Again, Proverbs 11:24-25. Here we clearly see the counterintuitive concept. The one who gives freely gains more, and the one who is generous is enriched. Those two verses don't mention about giving and generosity should be to the poor necessarily, but the other verbs in Proverbs do focus on giving to the poor. Proverbs 14:21 says, "The one who despises his neighbor sins. Whoever shows kindness to the poor will be happy." Proverbs 14:31 says, "The one who oppresses the poor person insults his maker, but the one who is kind to the needy honors him." Proverbs 19:17 takes it a step further. "Kindness to the poor is a loan to the Lord, and he will give reward to the lender." In other words, give to the poor is to give to God himself. This reminds us of Jesus' words in Matthew 25, that those who give food, clothing, water, and hospitality to those in need are doing it to and for Jesus himself. So how can we show our generosity to the poor? Well, it starts with having a heart of compassion for those who are caught in a cycle of poverty, realizing that there are many different reasons that lead to poverty. And that from a place of compassion and with contentment to please and honor God, we set aside some of our income to help the poor, and we do so by helping wherever we can, or by making donations to help feed the hungry or support and get involved in other ministries that help the poor. So, let's do a quick review. God's plan for financial management and stewardship is pretty simple. Number one, honor God with everything you are and have, and trust in God, not in his riches, not in riches. Number two, live within your means. There are 4 simple parts of a wise financial plan. Give generously, budget carefully, save proportionally, borrow sparingly. Number 3, don't sacrifice what is truly valuable for the sake of money. Many things are more valuable than money, like God's wisdom, our good reputation, our health, and our families. Number 4, learn to be content with enough. The love of money and the desire to be rich leads to danger and destruction. Watch out for the get rich quick schemes, and keep the right perspective on money and possessions. Jesus said, and he then told him, watch out and be on guard against all kinds of greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. Luke 12:15. And number 5, be generous towards the poor. Generosity leads to blessings. Hoarding leads to poverty. By sharing with others, we give to God himself, and we remember the important truth. Rich and poor have this in common: the Lord makes them all. Proverbs 22:2. Rich or poor, God loves us, and we belong to God. Rich or poor, pleasing God includes trusting him, putting him first, honoring him with all we have and all we are. So, what did you enter the world with when you were born? What do you have this morning that you did not come from God? What have you achieved with your own hard work and talents? What do you expect to take with you when you die? I hope that your answer to all these questions is nothing. God is the source of all good things in your life. And whatever you need this morning, will you come forward as we stand and sing the song of invitation?